Welcome to Pregnancy Help Podcast. We have a bonus episode for you on the Dobbs case as we're talking about some of the recent updates and things that have happened. So these are some really interesting times. So along those lines, now is really the time to be ready, to be well-trained and prepared to serve an influx of clients. So you can help your volunteers and staff prepare by sending them to Heartbeat International's Pregnancy Help Institute, which is happening this year in Columbus, Ohio at the end of July. We have 3 tracks: new director, development, and leadership tracks. And we're also hosting a Love Approach Ultrasound hands-on training that week as well. So I love this training in particular because it takes place in a smaller group environment. You have the chance to ask questions and have discussions with experts in pregnancy help. So you don't want to miss this, and you can find out more as registration just opened. So find out more at heartbeatservices.org under the training tab. And now I will turn things over to our host, Betty McDowell.
Hey, thank you so much, Christine. It is so good to be here today to have Jor-El Godsey, president of Heartbeat International, and Danielle White, our general counsel here at Heartbeat International. One of the benefits, I think, of being on staff at Heartbeat is that not only are we colleagues, but we're friends. And so when things happen in our personal lives or something happens in relation to the movement, it's not uncommon for us to get on text or even calls or emails or GIFs or GIFs or memes or whatever.
All of the above.
To continue conversation. So putting that in play and thinking about Jor-El, because I've heard you say it. I don't know, in history, it's been credited to lots of different people, but that the verbiage, may you live in interesting times. I think that continues for us in our world. And last night was one of those interesting moments in the times within which we live. So I thought it would be great to allow others to sit in on kind of a conversation that we would normally have about such topics and such issues. So let's start by talking about the fact that something happened that we really witnessed the first time in history, or at least modern history, that something happened and what it means in terms of the pregnancy help movement, what it means for us, and not just this issue, but what it relates to, which is really the Dobbs case. So Danielle, how about we start with you and you kind of just lay out the groundwork on what we're really talking about, as if people don't already know, because it'll be in the title.
Yeah, that's right. So on May 2nd, Politico released a draft opinion. This is a first draft opinion by Justice Alito. The draft dates to February 10th. And again, it's a first draft. So the first and most important thing that we need to recognize is that the court has not ruled on Roe. It has not issued an official opinion. This is a draft, and we have to remember that the draft was from February. So we're sitting here in May. The court has been working hard. They know they're going to release the opinion by the end of June. It would be silly to assume that nothing has changed from that draft. So we just have to recognize that a lot of what we're talking about now is just speculation. It's exciting news. It's certainly great to see where the court was headed from the perspective of knowing that this is a reality, that this is a real possibility. But we also have to recognize that it ain't over till it's over, and it's not over. So it's definitely.
The headline, though, I think that's the most accurate thing we can say, is that the Supreme Court has voted to overturn Roe. Like that, we can have confidence in. At least I think what we saw was a 5-3, and then there have been some updates since then that basically says the reason that Alito was caused to draft. I mean, there's some structure that hints at that vote and what the vote actually meant. Isn't that right, Danielle?
Yeah, that's true. And so you have Alito drafting the opinion. And what that means that the court voted to overturn Roe is that now they have to work this all out in drafting. And there's been another leak that's come out where CNN is reporting that Justice Roberts would not have gone with the majority to overturn Roe. So the question is, in the time between when they voted and now, has Justice Roberts convinced any other justice to join him in a concurring opinion, or has he convinced enough justices to come away from that original stance such that the Alito opinion that was released will not actually be the majority opinion? That's a possibility. It's a possibility that that the Alito opinion is a concurring opinion and there's a different majority. We have to remember that this happened. This has happened to us before in the Planned Parenthood versus Casey case, where there was a last minute change in vote from Justice Kennedy. And so just the caution here is that we don't know. We just don't know yet what this is all going to shake out to be.
One of the questions that's come up is just the legitimacy of this report. And I think that as of this moment in time, it appears that it really is a legitimate draft. Again, it was drafted, you said, in February, so things may have changed since then, but it really is a legitimate draft.
Yes, the court has released a statement, and they say that it is a legitimate. The court has confirmed that it is a legitimate draft, but it is not a final draft. This is an unprecedented thing that you mentioned, Betty, in modern American legal history. This is just not something that happens. A draft of an opinion being released like this. It's concerning. It's concerning because it works to undermine the rule of law in this country, and that's a serious problem. We have to believe, we have to have a country where the rule of law is paramount, and where we can rest assured that our court has considered cases and has released opinions that are not unduly influenced by the media, by the mob, by public opinion. That's part of the reason that Roe was so egregious to begin with, and that Casey was so egregious to begin with, was that the court was not rooting its opinions in the Constitution. They were playing this, legislative put my finger in the air and see how the public is trending, and this is I think a last ditch effort to make that be how the rule of law is arrived at, and that cannot stand in our country.
They are rightly influenced by the actions of the republic as far as the states are being voted. So I certainly understand, like, hey, because, oh my goodness, something is trending on Twitter should not really be a reason to alter a vote on a ruling. But when I, like, for instance, in my naivete, I used to think it kind of silly when one state made a rule and that was then challenged, and then other states kind of lined up behind it, making the same rule. Like, hey, step back. Let the court figure this out and then do your thing. But actually, I've come to understand, like, the fact that, like, since Dobbs came out, since the heartbeat bill in Texas came out, you have other states that have been moving, and that is the constitutional process in action. So that's not the mob per se, and frankly, it's it doesn't matter whether it's the media or not. It is the republic speaking the way that the republic best does, and then also best informs the court about public opinion. It is the republic, and then that is the public opinion being expressed through how at least our system of government should allow, is the people's representatives speaking on behalf of the people they represent, right? That is a fair action, and that's really the underpinning of the whole issue as well. Would you not agree, Counselor?
Well, I dare not say no. No, I mean, I do agree. But the pressure on the court should come not through these leaks by some clerk potentially, but should come through our elected representatives and through our process, through voting, through the legislatures making laws. And so that's, I think, what is so disheartening about this. This is just an egregious breach of, of ethics for attorneys. And, any attorneys that are listening to this, I'm sure we're especially floored because as the public, we're pretty used to things leaking. It's not all that unusual that things leak. It's very unusual at the Supreme Court. And so attorneys especially were really, really floored by this. And I think part of what makes it so heartbreaking is that regardless of how this comes out, how this opinion comes out, this works to undermine the authority and the authenticity of that opinion. This works to undermine the process. And within the court itself.
Yes. And I want to get to the leak in a minute, but let's talk about, okay, if the Alito is the majority opinion, and with the caveat that we don't absolutely know that for sure, what does it say?
Yeah, so the opinion is really an uncompromising reversal of Roe and Casey. It would return the issue of abortion to the states, where, candidly, it always belonged. And yeah, it's stunning. It's stunning.
And very, very powerful in its way. To the point, I think even Alito, at least according to the draft that was released or leaked, he does talk about the states were actually moving, and yet the action of the court abruptly interrupted the state's ability to do any of that. And that was they were tipping the scales. That some have called Roe an act of a super legislation versus a constitutional understanding of the legal argument. And I think Alito speaks to that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, part of what makes reversing Roe so exciting is that now the country can work the way it was intended to work, which is that the states were intended to be laboratories of public policy. And once you get Roe out of the way, the states can now get creative. The people can get to work. They can go to their legislatures. The legislatures can enact laws and try some things that we haven't been able to try because the Supreme Court has just said absolutely not, and has not allowed the democratic process to play out the way that it was intended to work.
So what is the challenge? Sorry, Betty, I'm jumping in here and asking questions because Danielle and I haven't really had a chance to kind of walk through this. Isn't that the concern then? It's like, well, we end up with a patchwork of laws across the state, as if that doesn't exist anywhere else. And yet, isn't that that's a feature, not a bug, right?
Exactly. That's exactly the way our country is supposed to work, because the states are so different in their makeup, in their character, in their culture, in their values. And so to have these questions decided at the national level and then crammed down to everyone as if all these states are exactly the same just doesn't make sense. So it's this ability of the states to really grapple with what the policy should be in their locality that makes this country work as well as it does. And so a patchwork of laws it's nothing new. It's nothing scary. We've been doing this for a long time. And yeah, I think what you said of it's a feature, not a bug is absolutely true.
So if I knew how to use Twitter, I would be tempted to tweet something like, if you don't like living in a state that protects women from abortion, then don't live there, right? Is that like, that's kind of turning a phrase back on them. If you don't like abortion, don't have one, but don't have a law that doesn't allow me to have one. Well, that's exactly the whole nature of our government and how it should work, is that these are laws that are made by the politicians, not the people in black robes.
Yeah, 9 unelected judges.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about what Alito said or what was put out in the Politico report, because I know when I read through it last night, it reminded me of a certain amicus brief that was filed. And so I wanted to know if you would comment a little bit about that, because I feel like Alito, while he didn't mention that particular amicus brief, he certainly pointed to what you put into the Supreme Court on behalf of Heartbeat International and women. So share a little bit about that, please, Danielle.
Yeah, so Heartbeat submitted an amicus brief in this case, and I had the honor of drafting that amicus brief while I was on maternity leave with with my fourth baby, a little girl. And, really the crux of the brief was that women don't need abortion. And one of the key reasons that women do not need abortion is because of the assistance that's available to them through pregnancy help. We have a robust network of pregnancy help that has grown in size and scope certainly since Roe and even since Casey. Back in 1992, when Casey was decided, there were only 3 pregnancy centers that were offering medical services such as ultrasounds to women. Now that number is over 2,000. And so it's just changed. The landscape of women walking through an unexpected pregnancy has really changed. And it's really disheartening as a woman to read the Casey opinion when you read that women have come to rely on abortion in order to participate equally in the social and economic life of the nation. I just think that that's such a disempowering message. And it's not true. It's not true. Women do not need abortion in order to pursue their dreams, in order to pursue careers, education, relationship goals. And so to pretend that the country sits at the exact same place as it did when Roe was decided, or even when Casey was decided, is just not true. And so that's an excellent reason, one of the great reasons why the court need not just stick to precedent, and why, as Justice Alito says in his opinion, that stare decisis, which is again that idea that the court is going to stick to its precedents, stand by the things it's already decided. Stare decisis is not an inexorable command. Easy for me to say. And so the court can go back and reevaluate its precedents. And when they are egregiously wrong, as the Alito draft says, can overturn them.
Thanks, Danielle. So if we're looking at this, we see, okay, first time in history that this leak occurs, perhaps to put pressure on the Supreme Court justices to, succumb to the pressure and make some changes in decision. The bottom line is that we really don't know. We don't know what happens next. We don't know what the opposition will do to try to take advantage of this. But if we were to take it on face value, it certainly is good news. No matter what, good news or even bad news in this. I'd like you, Jor-El, to talk a little bit about what does that mean then to those of us in pregnancy help? What does it mean to the centers?
Well, that's been our question, since really knowing that this was a possible course that the Dobbs case was going to provide, right? We weren't sure what the path would be, even as we see this information, that as the more information comes out, even without Roberts looks like was willing to uphold the 15-week, which was kind of hinted at in his oral argument, which was we both Danielle and I were on the ground for that in DC. But there's an understanding. It's like this doesn't. While this is a major thing, if indeed it holds and the vote stays as it is, in my mind, it should be strengthened. I think Roberts should change his mind and change in favor as a reaction to the leak. I know that, frankly, I think all the justices should just, on principle, make this a 9-0 vote. They won't because they can't. Their ideology doesn't allow them to. But they should, in a repudiation of this fact that, hey, we're not going to be bullied, we're not going to be leaked. But that's a comment on the courts. I want to comment on this. Doesn't necessarily alter anything that the pregnancy centers are doing at all. I mean, the pregnancy help existed shortly after the very first state enlisted, Colorado in '67, and California and North Carolina and Oregon. All those 4 states happened in '67. What happened? The pregnancy help movement was born, because while these courts can move in direction and laws can be made and other things can happen, women and especially those that are unexpectedly pregnant, not knowing where to turn, need to have somewhere to turn. That is every bit about what pregnancy help is. And that's why in moving into this reality of a of now having abortion states, we have to now also recognize the value of life states, right? So as several states have moved intentionally towards not just allowing abortion, but actually funding it, and not just funding the act of abortion, but somehow, creating money in their budget to help people to come to their state to have abortions. That is appalling on its face, but that's where the ideology of abortion is taken hold the most. And on the other side, we have states that are making themselves life states. Like some are very far along in this. Texas, heartbeat bill. Since then, South Dakota, Florida has joined the Mississippi camp, and Oklahoma is now taking it even further. All of these states are now moving, if not in a full-on life position. Alabama tried to do this, a couple years ago. So there will be those states that will move to be full-on life states, and of course those that are unfortunately moving to be full-on protectors of abortion. And so these things are going to be happening. And guess what? Pregnancy Help lives in both of those. And pregnancy, particularly the centers, I think of those pregnancy centers, in particularly who are on the border or who are within striking distance, they may live in a life state, but the abortion state is a neighboring state. We know this happens, with some of the states surrounding Illinois, for instance. Illinois is taken that path. California certainly has. New Mexico is a huge abortion state, where neighboring Texas is increasingly full-on life state. So these are the environments where it's still going to be necessary to love women into life-affirming decisions, because in one sense, the abortion states are where the greatest oppression from abortion will exist. But it's going to be everywhere. And frankly, it's not even going to be a matter of what state they're in, because the abortion industry has been changing. They've been anticipating this date for a long time. They've been moving towards a chemical abortion reality where they don't care what state you're in. They're going to mail you your abortion, so that it's not about walking through the door of Planned Parenthood. It's about opening the door and finding this medication on your front porch, and then making the door of your bathroom the door that's going to be your abortion clinic of the future, or of the present, in fact. So these are realities that the pregnancy help movement is shifting to as well. And that's what we've been called to. We've been called to help her in this situation, not to let her fall into the trap of the predatory acts of abortion or its abortion providers.
So all pregnancy help organizations, that's pregnancy centers, medical clinics, the adoption agencies, the maternity homes, our mobile units, across the way, not only does their work continue, but in many ways, it's probably going to increase. And we've already seen that really happening in some of the states that you've mentioned. That's pretty good. And
Texas showed us the way. I mean,
yes.
The fact that the Texas heartbeat bill was able to stick in September, it really gave us a test tube, for instance. It's kind of one of the values of having 50 states that have their own laws. Is like, wow, suddenly we could all see, how did that work for them? Well, we did see a huge number of women rush across the state lines to New Mexico, Oklahoma, even Louisiana. There were women who were able to intentionally drive across to get their abortions that they wanted. But what also happened, which doesn't get reported enough in my mind, is that there were women who were suddenly saying, you mean I don't have to have an abortion? We heard this at Option Line. We heard this from the centers themselves in Texas. So yes, the number of abortions went up in the states surrounding Texas, but also the number of pregnancy centers, client numbers presenting in that time frame also went up. So we know that that's a reality that will be in every life state. But also hopefully as well in some of the abortion states, there will be women going, wait, I don't have to get an abortion. The law, I can be protected, even though that's not may not be the reality in their state. They may be reading and understanding that as a reality in other states that will give them courage to do, and then they're going to need our help. Again, this is why the pregnancy help movement exists.
That's really good stuff, Jor-El. I know when we were doing the series the Dobbs series. So we've got webinars and we've got podcasts on that. One of the things I remembered out of that was that Danielle talked about, it was right after you guys were in Washington, D.C., and the Supreme Court was looking at this particular case. I remember you saying, Danielle, like a decision probably is made fairly quickly, but we need to pray, because in that process, that's where minds can sometimes be changed and votes can sometimes be changed. And so it really continues, doesn't it? The need to pray for our Supreme Court justices. And so thinking about that, what kinds of things should we really be praying about when it comes to this particular case and this situation in particular?
That's a great question. I think that one of the most important things we can pray for is for the safety of our justices. This is a very contentious issue. The outcome of this case could be influenced if there's a justice who's not able to vote. And so I think we really need to pray for the safety of the justices, for the safety of their families. I imagine that the pressure that they're feeling is unparalleled, I think. And I think they're the same with their clerks. I think we need to pray for the rule of law in this country. I think it's critical that we have a Supreme Court that is reliable, and that even if people don't agree with opinions, that they believe that they can work through the system to change the opinion rather than by leaking and mob, violence or even just, public opinion at a time that's not proper as the court is trying to decide cases. So I think to pray for the rule of law is really critical. And keep praying for our centers, keep praying for pregnancy centers who are, wading through all of this on the ground. One of the things that I've told, just friends and family who have said, oh, how will your job change if Roe is overturned? In one sense, it doesn't, because the reality is that the very next day we would wake up and pregnancy centers all across America would open, and they would continue serving women just as they've done for the last 5 decades. There's lots of things that will change, but that won't. And so to pray for continued support for centers and for continued courage for people who are really stepping into women's lives and helping them through what is a very challenging time for them. Those are critical prayer needs.
Thanks, Danielle. And Jor-El,
I would say to add to that, Danielle, it's not so much what the pregnancy help movement is going to do; it's what the church going to do. This is really a new season for the church to re-engage. Now, I don't want to say it like they're totally disengaged, because the pregnancy help movement, as it is the church in action by and large. It's not that there aren't people that are outside the church are involved in that as well, but by and large, it is the everything but the steeple, right? It is the church. It is the people. It's the people in action. It's special forces of the church. But I believe that has allowed the church to have a population that is somewhat complacent on the issue. Yeah, we vote. Yeah, our church gives to the pregnancy center. Great, that's awesome. But now is the time to do more, to step in and say, because we're going to need, I was challenged. The scripture talks about, Jesus said this, right? The fields are white to harvest, but the laborers are few. So we're going to need more laborers to be involved with this. We're going to need certainly more donors, certainly more people that are willing to give out of their treasure, but we're also going to need more time and more talent, because as things increase and more women come to the centers or seeking the service of the center, or their issues are greater than the centers have been able to deal with, we're going to need to see more of the church engage. That means more pastors challenging their people to get involved. That means more women's ministry encouraging people to get involved, and then centers also adapting to make sure that as the center, we are offering people more opportunities to get involved. We're going to have to think differently than we've thought before. We have to do what we know works, what we know is successful, but also adapt to this new environment. And that's going to mean some major things. We talked at our 50th just last year about needing more people, needing more places, and needing more pathways. And that's going to be more true now than ever. We didn't know how true that was even a year and a half ago when we had our conference, our 50th anniversary conference. But it is going to be true. It is true, and it's going to be even more so as we step into the reality of a ruling like this, and if this is made official, then we're going to have lots more to do. And it's the church that's going to have to wake up to new engagement.
So I heard a lot of good stuff in here about we need to pray, we need to keep serving, we need to adapt to the times, we need to keep learning, we learn to or keep giving. There's so much that we can do. And we have some good resources like pregnancyhelpnews.com. We've already got articles out. And in closing, I just want to go back to both of you and take the question very quickly on center directors, those who are serving leaders, whether that's in a maternity home or a pregnancy center, who might be being approached by media right now and asking for their thoughts or their opinions, or even the concerns that they might have of people who are unfriendly, who might be harassing them. What word of encouragement, what word of advice would each of you give to those leaders?
So I think it's really important to continue to emphasize that the final opinion is not out. It's really important to let the court do their job, let them speak for themselves. They have not yet spoken. And so reminding people that this is not a final opinion, it is a leak of a draft. And the reality is that the pregnancy center, this is an opportunity for the pregnancy center to talk about the work that they're doing, regardless of how Dobbs comes out. The pregnancy center has the opportunity now to continue to share what they're doing to help women. But I think it would be a trap to opine about where the leak came from and what does it mean and all of that. I just think that we have to be patient. We have to wait for this process to play out the way that it is intended, and pray.
What do you want to add to that, Jor-El?
Thanks. I was looking make sure I got a good scripture reference. So in Acts chapter 18, you have Paul speaking, or Paul is in a situation, and he's challenged on all sides because he's been talking about the gospel, he's been confronted by it, and the encouragement to him comes from the Holy Spirit. It says, it's in red letters in the book of Acts, which is always an interesting thing because it's God speaking. He says, "Go on speaking, for I'm with you." And so we need to be bold in speaking about what God has called us to do, and we need not to shrink back from the opportunity. Now, we need to be wise as serpent, as gentle as doves in doing it. So let's take every opportunity, even those ones that present to us as potentially difficult. We want to go with the wisdom that Danielle talked about. Hey, I don't know that any of this is really what's going to happen, but we are here. Like, go to your messaging. Go to exactly what you do. And, this is where we have some information on agreement statements, and make sure that we can say, well, I don't know about all of this. All I know is that no woman should feel so alone that she feels the only pathway before her is to terminate the life of her child. Like, there's an agreement statement, and in the very least, we should say, well, I don't know, but I don't know about that, all of that, but every woman should be loved and supported in her pregnancy. Those are things we can all agree on and should agree on. We have that, and here's the good news. Our goal isn't to make abortion illegal. Our goal is to help a woman so that she doesn't need an abortion, regardless of its legality. So all of that is important to us. It's connected to us, but it's not something that we are absolutely reliant upon, because we are here to help her not need abortion, and that's our ultimate goal. And so I think we can speak to that boldly, with the proper care and compassion that we need to have. And you know what? There are some people that just want to argue, and they want to take away from the moment. And so for that, I would kind of reflect back to Nehemiah, where the guys are, they're outside the camp and they're just yelling stuff because they're just trying to distract us from the work. You know what? We have our spear in one hand and our rock replacing tool in the other hand, whatever that was, and we're building the wall, as Nehemiah said, and it's the wall that helps her be protected from the the actions of those who would want to take away from her. So we want to be there to help her. We can do that with grace. We can do that with God's confidence, and we can do that with the knowledge that we are here to help her, plain and simple. And that's what we can communicate well.
Thank you. Thank both of you. Appreciate the time with you, Jor-El, and with you, Danielle. We certainly do live in interesting times. I, for one, am very grateful that I get to live in these interesting times with you two and those who are serving in the movement. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Christine.
Thanks, Betty. Yeah, the resources that were mentioned, a lot of those can be found on heartbeatinternational.org/Dobbs. We have links to the podcast episodes. We have links to the pregnancy help news articles, some of the webinars and other trainings, all focused on Dobbs, so that you can be prepared for whatever happens. So stay tuned. We'll have more for you soon as more of this unravels, and be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. So with that, we thank you for listening to this episode of the Pregnancy Help Podcast.